So I spent the entire duration of my 20-year career in finance. And each and every one of the roles that I have worked in over the years have all been customer service related. Over the last 10 years or so has been kind of customer service on steroids. It's been more client advocacy and practice management. What drove me to this line of work is what seems to be an innate need to do things better, to make things better. And I've never really been one to accept standard practices. If I go to a business interested in a product or a service, for instance, and something strikes me, it's not uncommon for me to ask a question like, why do we do this way? Is there another way we can do it that's more efficient, maybe more fair and equitable to everybody involved? And unfortunately, not everybody appreciates this kind of questioning. I never really had to ask anyone in the medical field these kinds of questions until December of 2017. After locking a muscle in my hip at the gym, which didn't release for several days, I went to my family doctor for help. Very shortly after taking the first dose of the pain reliever she prescribed, I started to bruise. Throughout the days to come, I had to advocate for myself harder than I ever had to advocate for a client. I was turned away twice by my family physician, and finally on December 8th, 2017, I took myself to the local hospital to get checked out. Even there, I had to justify why I should be able to see a doctor that day. By 5 p.m. that day, I was admitted to Juravinski Hospital in Hamilton to begin treatment for acute promyelocytic leukemia, with barely a day left to survive. You see, acute leukemias work, they kind of function very similar to the chronic ones, but the timeline is quite a lot shorter. The time from onset to mortality is between 7 and 28 days. Suffice it to say, it was the most shocking and terrifying day of my life. On top of it, I was angry at how I had been treated prior to my diagnosis, and I felt a distinct skepticism about how seriously my health was being taken. There's much of that day that I don't really remember. It was a whirlwind of activities between downloading, family history and filling out paperwork and countless blood products received that day. The one thing that I do remember very clearly was the first time I met Dr. Lieber. As a rather intuitive control freak and grasping to really understand the severity of my situation, I hurled questions at him as much as I could, as many of them as I could think of, and I dissected his responses very closely to try to understand what was happening. It was very clear to me that, sorry, I lost my place, sorry. It was very clear to me that Dr. Lieber was as cool as a cucumber. He was very, very calm and very controlled. In retrospect, any question that came too close to free falling down the rabbit hole of pessimism was shut down immediately and redirected to positivity and optimism. As the weeks rolled on, I developed friendships with many of the nurses who treated me. And when Dr. Lieber came up in conversations, the sentiments were always very similar. They all said that he was an incredibly smart man and that he loved what he did. They often shared their experiences at his lectures. All of them in awe over the amazing level of depth he was so comfortable with as it relates to human cells. But I wondered if Dr. Lieber was a happy man because I didn't really see him smile or laugh very often. I suppose in his line of work, the heavy burden of saving lives and sometimes losing them probably makes it hard to remember that smiling and laughing are a couple of the things that makes life worth living. So I set myself to the task of making Dr. Lieber laugh. If ever in life there was a lesson in persistence, this was it. There were many attempts made, usually in the form of off-the-cuff remarks. I thought that they were hilarious, personally. but very often they were left. I was left in a cold draft. Until the day that Dr. Lieber and I were scheduled to do an interview with CHCH News for the Canadian Cancer Society's Daffodil Month last year. It was a dreary day outside. My fiance Marvin and I were sitting in the atrium of the hospital waiting for everyone to arrive. The atrium overlooks a beautiful large grassed area, and the Hamilton Inlet is behind it. Marvin jokingly razzed me about rising to stardom through my cancer journey. And I joked that I knew that it would happen one day. This just was not exactly how I pictured it happening. As Dr. Lieber approached us at the meeting point, it was clear that he was very deep in thought, and I could see stress etched into his expression. As he joined us, his tone was short and distracted. I explained that Marvin was jealous that I got to do a news interview, and that I had suggested that if he was looking for his own quick rise to fame, maybe he could try streaking in the background during the news broadcast. A look of shock crossed Dr. Lieber's face and was followed by a full-on belly laugh, and I had succeeded, and he relaxed a little bit too. Over the weeks and months, Dr. Lieber and I have had the great pleasure of spending a lot of time together, and I will remain in maintenance therapy for another year, so we will continue to see each other often. And I think breaking the ice that day really set the tone for our relationship. I think a common misconception is that once a person achieves remission or they're finished their IV treatment, that it's over. The battle is won and life goes on. As I'm sure many of you know, that's not the case. The recovery process is a long one, and as a high-risk APL survivor, is quite drawn out through the maintenance process. Fatigue, pain, mood swings, and chemo fog are all side effects that are amplified by the medications that I take. There have been many times of laughter and triumph, and there have been many times of great frustration. As someone who believes in healing the body through nutrition, it's literally been a tough pill to swallow. I think Dr. Lieber would agree that there have been days where I've really given him a run for his money. I have challenged the norm, as is my nature, by seeking answers outside of traditional medical practices, which maybe at times have pushed Dr. Lieber out of his comfort zone. At times, he has respectfully put me in my place, and at other times, we have both learned and grown together. I was asked what it was about Dr. Lieber that makes me believe that he is extraordinary, and how he has made a difference in my life. Long after my 22-day stay in hospital, and well after I had achieved full molecular remission, it occurred to me that the day I was admitted, Dr. Lieber had managed my spiraling emotions and skepticism in a way that allowed me to calm down enough to focus on helping win my own fight instead of fighting the people who were trying to care for me. And that is no small feat. I have seen the exhaustion and stress etched over his face in the time that we've worked together, but he selflessly persists. I've seen him drag himself into the hospital so sick he could barely speak, though wearing a mask, just so that he could keep his commitments to his patients and his team. I've never seen him give up, take a break, or put himself ahead of anyone. I've heard firsthand the statements of respect and admiration from the team who supports his work, and I've also spoken to many people outside of the hospital who respect him for the work that he does in the community. Beneath the tough exterior that was so hard to crack with a good streaking joke at the expense of my fiance, he is a man who carries 1 million pounds on his shoulders in the form of personal responsibility for life. I'm confident that the reason I had such a hard time getting a laugh out of him is because he's too hard on himself. From my own personal experience, I can see that he takes on so much, but he probably doesn't think he's doing enough still. In a world that has become so systematic and impersonal, what makes Dr. Lieber so extraordinary is not only his perseverance and his brilliance, but his humanity. It is my privilege to be here today, and only possible as a result of his outstanding effort, to award Dr. Brian Lieber with the 2019 Brian Druker Award, recognizing extraordinary care in CML.